After the war, returning soldiers rewarded national hero Winston Churchill by voting him out of office. And the Britain that Britain came home to was a smaller Britain than the Britain had left. The empire was crumbling. Places like India decided they weren't British after all, which was sad because those countries had lots in common with us. They had the same person on the stamps, they spoke the same language, they were the same colour on maps. But despite all that, they chose to act as if they weren't part of Britain, just because that was geographically true. What's more, around the world, superpowers like Russia and China were on the rise. The future looked more uncertain than ever, and in 1948, one man wrote a book full of chilling predictions about just how terrible that future might be. This is the book, George Orwell's chilling classic, 1984. In the book, using nothing but words, Orwell depicts a world in which people are manipulated by screens, manipulated by the media, manipulated by the government, something which thankfully didn't and couldn't happen. Although 1984 is set in the year 1984, it's not a 1984 anyone who lived through it would recognise. Orwell didn't predict Band-Aid or Ghostbusters, or Radio 1's Mike Reed banning Frankie Goes to Hollywood for singing about spunk. In fact, almost the only thing he got right was that there'd be a thing on the screens called Big Brother, and even then he didn't predict that it would eventually be on Channel 5. Orwell's scary vision spooked Britain so much it tried to avoid a nightmare future by reinventing itself, and the government was going to help. The post-war Labour government was one of the most radical ever, kind of a cross between Jeremy Corbyn and the Taliban.
A landslide swept Labour to power, with a majority unexpected even by its own leaders.
They were seen as the biggest architects of something called the welfare state. Where is the welfare state?
Where is it?
Yeah.
Well, it's sort of all around us.
Yeah, but where specifically in Britain?
The welfare state is a phrase that refers to, broadly, the help that government gives to all of us.
The welfare state helps people from the cradle to the grave. So is it just for people lying down?
It certainly helps people lying down.
They help to, you know, they give out bits and bobs, don't they?
Yes, they for poorer people, they provide
schools and housing
and benefit payments, top-ups to your wages if you're
How
working.
did they decide what not to give out for free? Like, was there ever a plan to give out free crisps?
I don't think they've ever given out or thought about giving out free crisps, although I quite like crisps.
I love crisps.
I don't think many people would argue that you can't have a decent life without free crisps.
I think I'd kill myself if I couldn't have crisps. As part of its reforms, the government introduced the National Health Service, or NHS for less long.
On July 5th, the new National Health Service starts, providing hospital and specialist services, medicines, drugs and appliances.
Once the NHS arrived, if you were poor and you got sick, you weren't on your own anymore. You were in a crowded waiting room full of other sick people. Suddenly, you could see a doctor free of charge, like you can every Saturday evening on BBC One. But staffing all those hospitals wasn't going to be easy, so Britain looked abroad for help. In 1948, the government granted British citizenship to everyone living in Commonwealth countries, a sort of reverse Brexit, or TIC-SERB. And a few months later, 492 migrants made the journey from the Caribbean to Britain on board the Empire Windrush, which was a sort of sea car or boat. The newcomers soon discovered life in Britain was very different to Jamaica. It was colder, wetter. We had potatoes instead of posh fruits. But they soon settled into a British way of life, not smiling and being permanently tired. Britain was becoming multicultural, although not everyone was happy. Not even racists, who at long last had someone new to hate, apart from Jews, Italians, Spaniards, women, the Irish, the French and the poor. Because far-right Facebook groups hadn't been invented yet, the only way racists could express their fury was to take part in race riots, which are sort of artisan pop-up festivals of hatred. Today, racist bigotry has no place in contemporary Britain, except Kent. Britain was welcoming a new era, and it was about to get something mega new, a new monarch. The royal family had experienced a rough few decades. Before the war, King Edward had abdicated so he could spend more time in his mistress. His brother George also vacated the throne unexpectedly early to spend more time in his coffin. This meant his eldest daughter Elizabeth was to be the new female king at the age of just 25.
Now the Princess Elizabeth we knew and loved returns amongst us as our queen.
For centuries, the coronation of a monarch was a sacred event that took place behind closed doors, just like a visit to the toilet, but more dignified than that makes it sound. But now, thanks to progress, everyone was allowed to peek behind those closed doors. In 1953, millions of Britons watched the Queen being coronationed on their new televisions. It must have been like watching The Crown on Netflix, but live and actually happening. Like Britain's Got Talent, but more serious. Like Game of Thrones, but set in the real world, and starring Queen Elizabeth like The Crown again. Afterwards, incredibly, people didn't take the TVs back when they found there weren't any more coronations on. They kept them in the front rooms and never went out again. As well as a new Queen, the nation had got itself a new Prime Minister. Britain was changing so fast that the only way to tell what country it was to keep getting everyone to wave flags. The national mood was shifting. It's the 1950s, a time of great change. The war's over, the NHS has been founded, the coronation's on TV, Mario 64's redefined the platform game for a new generation, and Anthony Eden's Prime Minister. How did Britain feel about these things?
Well, I don't think computer games had been invented by the 1950s. The other things, I mean, the population was pretty positive about the coronation. That was a cause for excitement. Anthony Eden, perhaps less successful with the Suez crisis.
What was up with the sewers? Did someone try to flush something that was awful?
No, the Suez Canal.
What, the canals used to be sewers? That's disgusting.
No, Suez. It's a place.
All right. During this Suez crisis, events in Suez reached crisis point. More research needed. Make sure script amended before voiceover record. And it wasn't just grown men who were causing trouble. A new form of human being called the teenager was evolving. Teenagers were creatures that looked like adults, yet had the minds of children, like professional footballers do today. And the young generation as a whole was about to deliver Britain a series of shocks that would shock it right up the shock box. On the next and final episode of Cunk on Britain, I'll see how the groovy young people of the 1960s encouraged Britain to tune over, turn off and drop up. And Britain experienced a golden age that sadly couldn't last. In the 1960s, if you switched your television on, you'd get Morecambe and Wise, Cilla Black, Bob Monkhouse, David Frost. But nowadays, they're all dead. Why is that?